Hi there, thanks for joining me on Tropical Weather Impact on your Monday morning. It is August 11th. Our next name, Storm Erin, has been designated in the Atlantic. Now, I wanted to start out with a broad view on where Erin is because it is absolutely nowhere to being a threat to the United States right now. It's still way off, just off the coast of Africa here, but that's where Erin has formed, our fourth named storm of the season. And this is likely going to become not only our first hurricane of the season, but major hurricane is currently in the forecast. You can see they're sitting about 280 miles west-northwest of the Cabo Verde Islands, and it is going to be traveling due west for the next few days as it tries to intensify more towards the middle and end of the week. So here it is, the official cone for Erin, the first one coming out showing the storm somewhat maintaining its intensity as a tropical storm through at least Tuesday, but then it starts to move into a more favorable environment by the end of this week. And right now we are forecasting this thing to be a major hurricane just north of the Caribbean islands. There's Puerto Rico, here's the Virgin Islands, here's the Lesser Antilles. A little too close for comfort, but the trends are at least looking optimistic at this point for not only the Caribbean islands, but the United States. Still a long ways out though, so we still got a lot of stuff to watch here, but we're expecting our first hurricane by around Wednesday more than likely, and then ramps up quickly to that major hurricane status by Friday and Saturday, sitting just north of the island. Now remember, our cones only go out 5 days, and so we have a solid forecast for the next 5 days. After that, things start to get a bit more murky, but we're noticing trends here that this could end up being an out-to-sea storm, which is what we want when we're talking about a major hurricane. So again, there's San Juan, there's Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands here. That's where we could have the center of the hurricane. Now keep in mind, if this hurricane comes in down here, that's the center. That's a little too close for comfort for our islands. On the other side, if it comes in a little further north as a hurricane, then that's a safer option. So we're going to watch this very closely for our Caribbean islands from Puerto Rico down through the Virgin Islands and further south here. Hurricane approaching those areas, maybe north of them by Friday and into Saturday. So a solid 4 days to really keep an eye on this. Let's look at our spaghetti plots or our tropical models. You can see there they agree in the near term. This thing's headed west. The most important thing for Erin though is when does that northerly turn start to happen? We're probably going to start to see at least somewhat of a northwesterly component to this by Wednesday into Thursday, and that's going to be crucial because we need it to turn sooner rather than later, because the further west it gets, the more of a problem this could be for some of the islands, whereas if it starts to turn a little sooner, then it's safely passing north of the islands, and it's more than likely passing well east of our east coast of the United States. So this will be crucial. When does that turn start to happen? We'll be watching for it around Wednesday. And then by Thursday, we should have a solid northwest movement. That's going to continue through Friday. And then we really start to see things slow down, and you see a slow turn into early next week. Now, one of the problems here trying to forecast a turn, it's going to be a slow turn, and that's a very tricky thing to try to nail down. A slower moving system making a turn is rather difficult to nail down just because you throw a lot of wrenches in the forecast with that slow movement. I do think, again, this turn, though, is looking like the most likely scenario by early next week. Now, if I'm in Bermuda, we got to watch this really closely. I'm still watching it closely in all the islands here, and I'm watching it closely along the East Coast. But in the Gulf right now, I think we're looking pretty good at the moment. We'll make sure nothing crazy happens with this, but in the Gulf, we're just sitting back, checking in once a day, seeing what's going on with Tropical Storm Erin. Why do we anticipate this turn? Well, it all has to do with the ridge breaking down. Our heat ridge is currently, our blocking ridge is what we call it, is extremely strong across the entire Atlantic basin. That's why this feature, Erin, is going to be traveling due west. It may actually even have a little southwest jog. We don't want it to jog too far southwest, but may even jog a little bit southwest. Notice the ridge here, but as we go out in time, that ridge does begin to weaken. Here we are Saturday into Sunday. The ridge still very strong over the southeast and over off the east coast. Watch what happens though to this section of the ridge by Sunday and Monday. See the weakness developing? That's thanks to a trough that's going to be digging across the eastern U.S. That will act to help the strongest part of the ridge back to the west and open up, give us an opening or a weakness in the ridge for Erin to travel. And so where we stand right now is we'll probably start to see the storm slow down and make that gradual turn into the weekend, and more so Sunday and Monday of next week. So in about 6 to 7 days. Now, it's got to make that turn in order to not be a threat for the East Coast. Now, the way we see it right now is that that turn seems fairly likely, being that this will likely be a major hurricane. But let's say something goes wrong in the forecast, the storm is weaker, or maybe it jogs a little further south because it is weaker. Well, then you've got it turning a little bit later, and then that's when you start to get into scenarios where you don't want it trapped under the edge of this ridge here, slowing down and getting a little too close for comfort to the East Coast. And so that's going to be a very crucial part in this forecast here, is when does the turn happen and how strong is this ridge once we get towards the weekend and early next week. We got to get this ridge to weaken quite a bit. And looking at the data right now, this trough that's going to be digging down and weakening it looks fairly good and fairly big. And so that would be a good scenario for the east coast of the U.S. Maybe not so good for Bermuda. It's out there, and so it's going to have to watch this very, very closely. It is rare for Bermuda to have a direct strike from a hurricane just because it's such a tiny area on a big map, but it's worth watching, especially for the island nation there and for the Caribbean islands as well. So looking at its ingredients ahead of this thing, the reason we have this becoming a major hurricane right now is because not only the water temperature is going to be moving into a very low shear environment. I don't think dry air is going to be a huge factor in this part of its life. So there's San Juan and Puerto Rico. This is where it's going to be in its prime to really blow up into that bigger hurricane. Now, in the near term, what'll be interesting is to see how much can it actually organize more than what it is now. Notice water temperatures out here in this part of the Atlantic where it's going to be traveling are not extremely warm. Now, they're warm enough to support a tropical system, but I mean, we're talking about 79 to 80 degree water temperatures. That's the low threshold you need for a tropical system. We also have quite a bit of dry air right now, and we do still have some wind shear, but I think it's going to be really moving into that better environment by about Wednesday, and that's when we're forecasting a hurricane, and then it's off to the races. And here, water temperatures are warmer, wind shear doesn't look to be a major problem, should have a good ventilation flow for this thing to really strengthen, and I'm not sure dry air is going to be able to do a whole lot with this. Now, at the moment, it is kind of wrapped up in dry air, but the thing that's helping this feature out at the moment is that it does have a lot of moisture and a fairly big envelope of moisture with it. What does that mean? Well, it can insulate itself from the dry air. And so for a tropical system to survive, you really only need the core to maintain itself. And if you've got enough moisture surrounding the core, that dry air can't get sucked up in it, then you don't have any dry air disrupting the core of the system. And so that's one thing that this system has working for it, is that it pulled all this moisture in with it from the monsoon trough, and I think it's going to be able to insulate itself. I mean, it has maintained itself so far, sitting in marginal water temperatures and surrounded by that dry Saharan dust. Let's put it in motion. You can see the big old red blob there. That's going to be the GFS model depicting the hurricane moving off to the west. Here we are on Wednesday. It's somewhat situated between some dry air. Got that big envelope of moisture with it. Put it out in motion. You can see there is some dry air trying to get wrapped up in it. Maybe it does. That's something we'll be monitoring, but this type of system, once it becomes a major hurricane, if it can really insulate itself, protect its core, then it only will be able to flourish thanks to those warm water temperatures, and also what you're looking at with regard to the lack of wind shear. And so warm water and lack of wind shear here, that thing can do it. Now, when you look at the ensemble models, and this is why you still need to watch it in some areas, especially maybe down towards the islands or off the East Coast. The GFS is in red. I don't have the European models in just yet for the system, but you can see they're in agreement, fairly good agreement, through about Thursday and Friday here. This is when things start to diverge, and the reason you get that is because the models disagree on the exact strength and just how strong that ridge is going to be here. For example, these systems down here show a weaker trough, stronger ridge, and then that's what gets it a little too close for comfort to some of our islands by the middle or earlier middle of next week. Now, these models, this would be best case scenario, and this is a possibility, that show the system traveling a bit further north, and the further north it travels faster on, well, then it's more likely to get pulled out to sea here as that ridge breaks down by early next week. And so I just wanted to show you this to show there is still a healthy amount of uncertainty on where the center of this soon-to-be hurricane, maybe major hurricane Erin, is going to travel. So let's just start by saying your stress level should be low on the East Coast here. Your stress level should certainly be low in the Gulf. I'm not losing any sleep over this right now, but we're going to monitor the trends. And luckily, we have a 5-day a 5-day time slot here to watch and see what it looks like once it actually nears this area, and that's where the uncertainty grows. So by about Saturday or Sunday, once the storm is somewhere in here, we're going to have a really good understanding on if it's out to sea or if it's something the East Coast really needs to watch. But we've got all week long to track newly formed Tropical Storm Erin. We will have updates for you coming daily here on Tropical Storm Erin, soon to be Hurricane Erin. They'll be right here on your Tropical Weather Impact. Thanks for joining me.